Hi, welcome to Inside the Moms Club, where being a mom is the coolest place to be. Here in the Moms Club, we believe that what embarrasses you now will make a great story later. And let's face it, you don't laugh sometimes, you're gonna cry. Join us in having a good laugh together. I'm Monica Samuels. You are now inside the Moms Club, your private destination for all things mom. Welcome, moms. We're so glad that you could join us today. And I'm here with my co-host, Jennifer Marsh. Hello, Jennifer. So glad that you could be here today with me.
Happy to be here.
And I'm glad
to start my day.
Jennifer and I spent last week together. She was helping me. We just got a vacation house, which we're very excited about. And she and some other friends were helping me decorate it. And so we moved around all the stuff that we'd already had furniture in it. So we took what we had and moved things around. And they discovered a lot about me because, you know, when people come into your house at that level, they learn things about you. So one thing they discovered is I have a coaster fetish? How would you describe it? I collect coasters. So, and we were trying to decide, like, why am I like that? And I think we discovered it was really
there
because
are
of
many kinds of ways to make sure that your drink is safely, all the moisture is managed on your drink.
But nothing like a great coaster. And I had a childhood trauma that makes me really go insane when people put, you know, wet things on nice furniture. So, and occasionally my moms who were there last week, a couple of them, even with all the coasters around, they still occasionally, not you didn't do it.
No, I have been well trained by a family of antique dealers who do not put anything wet anywhere near wood, ever, never.
Yeah. So, but y'all did a great job. So when the people we bought the house from, they had a designer come in and place the furniture and everything, and it looked nice. But after you all got finished, it looked amazing. I mean, you all did a really great job. And then we took notes of what we needed to do. And it was kind of fun too, because I learned how other people decorate and design their house. And even I've worked with a couple of designers in the past too, and I've seen, you know, how they do it. Mm-hmm. But even like, you know, our friend Kat, who she'll take something an article, something I had, a candle, and she'll walk around every room in the house, you know, and look for a spot where it belongs. And I had never really,
that's really a unique talent, you know, in the design field, and accessorizing a house, stylizing a house, it makes such a difference. And some people just, I think, are born with that talent to know exactly how to line up the books on the shelf and artfully put the objects next to the book so it all looks casually amazing. Mm-hmm. Doesn't look too staged. It looks like they just all landed in that beautiful composition.
Yeah,
and she has a unique,
and that is such a talent, because you could give me 3 books and 2 bookends in the shelf, and I could make them look really bad. I mean, I just can't.
And you can try really hard. I mean, you can set it up 15 different ways and somehow never end up on the right exact composition. And, you know, it's funny, my sister has that talent and I don't, which is funny because she's much more of an interior design talent. Mm-hmm. Whereas I can design the bookshelf, just don't ask me to put bookshelves in it. Anything, books, knickknacks.
Well, the other thing, so while we were traveling there, I guess you were reading a book by a friend of yours whose son is autistic. So share a little bit about that.
Yes, the book is called Underestimated, and it's about a friend of mine whose son is 17 years old, which is just a year younger than my daughter. Actually, I think he's 18 now, and she's 19 now. But his son had what he calls the real autism, which, you know, he's been working tirelessly since his son was born with diet and every kind of intervention you can imagine. He's been really dedicated to finding a way to make his son live the best life possible. But even after all of that, his son was largely nonverbal. And but, you know, he wasn't willing to give up because he's like, he had a sense that his son was capable of more, and that there was a place that they could go beyond where they were currently, which was at an autistic school. And they found a way for him to communicate using a letterboard. And he discovered that his son is kind of cognitively 100% normal, just in terms of motor function, really unable to manage his body. So things like all forms of communication, writing, speech, they all require, control of your motor, control of your body, which he just didn't have. So it's a really interesting journey. And autism in general, is something that has been on the rise in our country. And a lot of people have, in so many fields of medicine, but definitely autism, have done an amazing job sort of working around the edges of it. And then, our guest today is someone who even had a son who was diagnosed autistic and then lost the designation, which is pretty incredible. And it's really the dedication of all these moms and dads and parents out there who work, kind of on the edges of what's considered mainstream. As long as they're not doing any harm, they're willing to put in the work. And trust me, putting your kid on a restrictive diet is hard. I had a son with sensory integration disorder. I tried this diet, and I was the one who had to go to every birthday party with my own cupcake, which is not normal. And no kid wants to be the kid with the special cupcake. But that's just, you say, it's not a big deal. We're just doing this because it makes him happier on a daily basis. Yeah. It makes him more able to be himself.
And there are a lot of parents that have issues that their kids are facing. Like my son was not autistic, but he had other issues where he had to go on that sort of diet. And so it was an elimination diet. And when they started that, we narrowed it down and we said, okay, Jared, you can now eat parsley and salt. It looks like those are the only two safe things for him. So, it is a challenge, but parents, it's amazing, particularly moms, yes, what we do and what we, do to help our kids, which is why we are very excited to have our guest here. She can talk about all the things we've just discussed. We are so happy to have Denise Davies here. And Denise is the founder and CEO of the award-winning design firm D2 Interiors. And she has a son, just to segue into what you just were talking about, Jesse, who was diagnosed as autistic, and she did not rest until she found the means to help him. And occasionally, even defying some of what the experts were telling her. And now he is a thriving 19-year-old, which is amazing and wonderful. And in the course of that also, she went from one business to another, and she's been collaborating with Carrie Bowen Poole, designing educational play spaces, and they have a business together called Smart D2 Playrooms, which we're excited to hear all about. So welcome, Denise. Welcome to the Moms Club.
Thank you very much. It's so great to
be here. Well, we want to go. So let's start, because it's so interesting to talk to moms. Yesterday when Jennifer, after we spoke with you, we were talking about, we kind of consider like moms can sometimes be professional moms. You have your profession that you're in, and then you have a mom issue that you're dealing with, and you handle it like you would, tackling any issue or you work problem or something. Yeah. So you started out in New York City and you were in fashion merchandise. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your first business? Because I kind of, after speaking with you, I kind of look at your life sort of in acts, and that happens with a lot of moms. So tell us about the first act.
The first act was I started out in New York City and I was in the fashion industry. I was there for about 18 years. Predominantly, I was a manufacturer, and I built a clothing business from nothing to $100 million, and we sold it, and it was extremely successful. And I just had such a passion for it, and I really loved it. And I believe that passion is the key to success. It's not, don't worry about the money, worry about find something that you love to do, and the money will just come. I mean, it really, and so I spent about 18 years doing that. And it was quite exciting. And I waited to, back then, this was 20 years ago, I waited a little later to get married. I was 35 when I got married, and I got pregnant right away. I very much wanted to have a child. And I stopped working as soon as I got pregnant because I really wanted to enjoy the experience, enjoy every stage of pregnancy. And so I had Jesse, and he was a 10-pound bouncing baby boy with a huge head.
Wow.
Thank God I had a C-section.
Wow. Yes. Yeah. Thank you for you.
And he's, still the joy of my life, as every, parent can relate to. And, I knew from the beginning, the first, 3 or 4, 6 months, he was developing slower than other kids, because you're in a mommy group and you see, and that is the worst when you have a kid who's lagging behind or delayed, and you're in the group with all these parents, and the parents are saying, oh, my child's talking at 7 months, and my child's crawling, and my child's walking, and
It
you know
is the worst. It's the worst.
he didn't
Yeah,
even
the whole my son knows 15 animal sounds, and like, wow, don't keep track of those things, please.
Chinese, and he's 11 months old. It's like,
Yeah.
um so he did, and I definitely noticed some developmental delays, and it just kept getting worse. And what did I know? I kept just, going along, and the traditional pediatrician said, oh, he's fine, it's all fine. And I really knew something was up, when really he was not fine, and he was not speaking. 16 months, 17 months, he had a few words, but he had, the way he looked was horrible. He had this big distended gut, like he was pregnant, and he had dark circles under his eyes, and constantly his nose was running, and I knew he wasn't right. And we had him evaluated by the state of New York, and he was diagnosed with autism. And I really noticed that right after his 18-month vaccinations, his MMR, that was really, he completely digressed, and he went from having maybe 10 or 20 words to having no words and having no eye contact. So that was really like I say, the nail on the coffin, where
Right.
I his body was just so, had so many toxins in it, food allergies and toxins from the environment, and the mercury in the vaccines. Back then, the vaccines all had
Right.
mercury in them, and and we tested him, and he had very high levels of mercury, um, later on. And I really believe that everything was just one big, mess when it all happened. And so he was diagnosed, with PDD, NOS, autism. We took him to the McCartan Center in New York City. He was evaluated, because of any good mom, I didn't want to believe it, but I knew something was wrong. And he, on a scale from 1 to 10, he was about a 6. I mean, he did self-stemming. He banged his head against the wall. He walked on his tippy toes. He just, you would call his name, Jesse, Jesse, and he wouldn't turn his head. I mean, it was quite scary.
Especially for a first-time mom, that must have been really hard, because you have nothing to compare it to other than your baby group. And on top of that, just when at his age, there just wasn't a lot of support group out there.
20 years ago, there was nothing. So I was fortunate enough to, I had a nanny who, was wonderful, and she was from Mexico, and they have a lot of alternative treatments there. And when the psychologist who diagnosed him walked out of the apartment, we ran over to the internet. She pulled up this diet. I put him on the gluten-free, casein-free diet immediately. And I started to research doctors, and I researched diets. And I mean, there were 2 books back then. I mean, it was ridiculous. There was nothing.
I know.
No food. But I did see, to make a long story short, within 2 weeks of being on the diet, he got very, very sick, where it was just, he was upper respiratory. It was coming out of everywhere. And then it was literally, I have pictures from before the 2 weeks and after the 2 weeks. He woke up. And I mean, you call his name, he would turn his head. His eyes were clear. The dark circles went away. So he was a kid who really did respond to the food allergies, and to the gluten and the casing.
How old was he at this point?
He was just turning 2 years old.
Okay.
I had a similar experience with my son, where he was basically a milk addict, which is often when you have it becomes a neurotoxin, and it has a dopamine effect. So even though it's awful for you and it's acting like a toxin in your body, you're addicted to it. So he was obsessed with drinking milk. So you find, children obsessed with, if they have a gluten intolerance.
bread, milk, and
Mhm.
that's the hardest thing, because what happened was, I got him on this path. I found an alternative doctor from Pakistan, Dr. Dipti. I'll never forget his name. And, he had him on 17 different drops a day. And he put him on a food rotation diet where he was eating ostrich and buffalo and bison and deer and all of these exotic meats, because we feed our kids 7 foods when they're little. And a lot of the foreign countries, they give them such a diverse amount of food, it builds up the gut biome and it builds up their immunities. So he was on all these crazy foods. I remember we went on vacation once and we're in Cape Cod, and I'm literally with the George Foreman grill grilling ostrich burgers, and the whole place stunk up. Ostrich.
Where do you buy those? I mean, we have several good grocery stores here in Austin, but I don't think I've ever seen an ostrich
I've
burger.
never seen ostrich
If you needed
before.
one, where would you? That's like a New York thing, or?
City had it. I mean, they had it at Fairway.
Oh, okay.
Nowadays you could get anything. I mean,
Yeah.
there were no green cleaning products. I greened the home and I made my own cleaning products. I mean, this is why I was successful in my first career, because I don't give up. I just did not give up. It's your child. I would have, I'll say, I would have stood naked in Times Square and sung an opera if I felt like this was something that would have helped him.
I think the amazing thing about your lesson is that you know your kid, and that's one of the things that is such a string among all mothers, is that often doctors will say your kid's fine, and you're like, no, I can tell you he's not. And also you can say, I can tell you this is working. Like they'll say, no, there's no the science behind that, it doesn't. And like, no, I watched it with my own eyes. He's now turning his head and responding to me. And when you don't have that many allies, like you started, this when there weren't many people kind of using these alternative methods, which are not harmful. I mean, it takes a lot of fortitude.
I think it's good too to, when you see these cues, to investigate it and check it out. I mean, for my youngest son, he didn't speak till he was about 15 months old. And so I was worried chronically about him, like, he's not talking. Well, then when he started, he wouldn't stop. So he was like, okay, he's okay. But I think now it wouldn't have hurt, unless I was listening to people saying, oh, you're just worrying for nothing and it's not anything. And those delays in looking into it could actually make the difference between a kid who really could use early intervention and a kid who, is going to be okay. So what have you seen that's changed since when you were dealing with this and now, as far as what's available, like alternative therapies that you explored that are like mainstream, or do you
Well,
think there's still?
it's funny because of course, the whole gluten-free, movement, and I really don't see that much has changed, though. I have to be honest with you.
Really?
I'm on the East Coast. I know on the West Coast, it's a completely different mindset. But I was fortunate enough to have found a doctor, when he was 4 years old, 5 years old, Dr. Nancy O'Hara, and she's one of the leaders in the world. She literally goes to other countries and mentors other doctors on how to treat children with autism biomedically. But I have to be honest, I have really not seen a lot. I mean, to the extreme. I'm an interior designer. I'm in a lot of people's homes. It's a very close relationship for a short time, but I am very close to my clients, and I go into people's homes and I meet their kids, and I can tell, right? It's funny when you've been through this, you can sniff it out. You can look at a kid and something isn't quite right. And I've been mentoring one of my clients. I actually got her to Dr. O'Hara, and the child's on the diet and he's getting early intervention because I spoke up and I said something to her, which is, a lot of it's like a fine line, but she never heard of any of this.
Mm-hmm.
She's in her early 30s. She's well educated. She lived in New York City. It's not like she was, crawled out from under a rock. And I still feel that it's really not a mainstream thing.
And
And
also, if you have a kid who's kind of on the spectrum in some way, like sensory integration is on the spectrum, and my son was a sensory seeker, like if he was my second child, so I knew it wasn't normal. But if it's your first child, you're like, I just have a spirited kid. You know, you don't understand that like it's not normal that they can't calm themselves down, that like they went from crawling to running full speed. Like that's just not normal. And I will say that one of the things I found made a big difference was that at least now there's a lot of forums and there's the internet has changed everything. And the so not that the internet wasn't there when your son was young, but now there's just so many more places on the internet where people are having conversations like we're having right here that people can listen to and see if they're helpful to them, and they can at least investigate some of these treatments that are complete. They have no side effects. I mean, we could all be on a essentially a paleo diet, and it would be amazing for us.
I've 20 years since he started no gluten, no casing. He's fine now. He eats whatever he wants, but I haven't had gluten or casing in 20 years.
Well, and there's the fact that there's almond milk in Target really helps. You know, there are quite a few, and you can find organic in even places like Walmart. It's really that the food accessibility has helped a lot, because if you're someone who's living in a place that's a little bit of a food desert or doesn't, you know, obviously we live in Austin, the home of Whole Foods. You know, I had lots of options. I had lots of nutritionists who knew exactly what to do, and they were on board and gave me a program to follow. But if I'd even been in Indianapolis where my parents live, or Detroit where my sister lives, that would not have happened.
Well, we've come a long way, especially nutrition is so key. Nutrition and what you're saying, the toxicity of what's in our environment, so the cleaning products and things like that. But I became more aware of the effects of nutrition really on your health when my oldest son was going through. He has severe food allergies. He has celiac, he has other issues, but it took us a while to get there, and he suffered a lot before we realized, hey, this is a thing that needs to be addressed. And you know, now he studies nutrition. I think he might even end up career wise going to something related to that. And he'll tell you, you know, we're still a long way.
We are.
Even though we have almond milk, we have all the oat milk, almond milk. It's expensive.
Right.
And so what does a parent do? And I feel bad because he teases me now about, well, when I was growing up, like, let's see, what did you feed me? I had chicken nuggets. I had macaroni and cheese. I mean, back then it was like, it was, yeah. The
food was ravioli. I mean,
exactly. The kids' diet was a certain thing that was really bad for you, really.
And even if you're feeding kids vegetables and fruits, if they're not organic, you know, if you're feeding your kid raspberries and strawberries that are not organic, the toxic load on those is really high, you know, because of all the pesticides. So you know, but now you can get organic at Target.
Yeah. Yeah, we're slowly moving in the right direction on that. And
the traditional doctors still are not on the, you know, I feel like if you have a child who is, you know, could be on the autism spectrum, I feel, and I'm not speaking for everybody, but I still feel that a lot of the pediatricians, and I know this from talking to parents, they still are clueless. Like they really don't, you know, they would never recommend. I can't tell you how many fights I've had with pediatricians that the diet does work and that there are alternatives, and you know that's more what I meant there. But
well, a lot of them will tell you too in medical school they don't study that. They might take a little bit of, you know, not much of their education goes into looking at the effect of nutrition on your health. So I think we're moving in the right direction, and whether it's autism or, you know, what Jared suffers from or a number of kids, I think we're getting there, but we're still a long way from.
But I feel like we're getting there because it's moms supporting moms, honestly.
Well, right. It's been a huge thing, and let's hear your happy ending to this story. So last when we were discussing his story, he was 2. So tell us what happened after that.
So when he was about, he had about 60 hours a week of early intervention, 6 hours a day of ABA therapy, went to an autistic school, a preschool in New York City. And he was one of 120 kids. And I was the only parent doing this, and he got out. like in a year and a half, they threw us out of the preschool in Manhattan, and I had to find a preschool for him in December in the middle of the year, which is probably, it was like trying to get your kid in Harvard, and it's crazy. So anyway, he just kept getting better. He followed the diet till he was about 12. Had some social issues going through school, but not that he had some help from the teachers and self correction, and so he didn't have outbursts. But for the most part, by the time he got to high school, 100%, you would never know he ever had any issues, and now he just finished his second year at Syracuse.
That is amazing. That is a great story, and that's very encouraging for all the moms out there who, are now hearing that their child, that's the diagnosis, that they're autistic.
That there is, I mean, there really
Yeah.
is. And he did, I do believe, a lot of it was all the work that we did, that he did. I believe a lot of it was the universe, and, a lot of manifesting and a lot of positive, thoughts. And I believe he grew out of it too. I mean, I do believe that all of the things were just, we were heading in the right direction. And what the interesting thing is, he doesn't remember anything. He has no memory before 5 years old. And I show him pictures. I tell him about it. We always say he dodged a bullet, and he gets it. And he, was a counselor at summer camp for autistic kids, and he really,
That's amazing.
Understands. But
That's a great thing. My oldest son was premature. He was born 10 weeks early. And when I was going through, I was on bed rest for 2.5 months, and he was born early. Then he had a surgery when he was very small. And I was completely freaking out about the whole thing. And my doctor finally sat me down one day and said, the pediatrician said, you know what? It's all going to be fine. You will be scarred for life because you will remember some of this and you've lived through it. But he'll be fine. And that's true. I mean, he's thriving, and it's thrilling, great to hear that your son is thriving. Well, we're excited, Denise. We have a group of moms who would like to talk to you. There are Mom Zoomers, and let's welcome the Mom Zoomers. Great to see you all today. We're here with Denise.
Hi, Denise. How are you?
Zoomers.
Well, let me introduce all the Zoomers. We have Helen Savage from Arlington, Virginia, is the mom of a daughter who's is she going into 5th grade now, Helen, or what grade?
She'll be in 5th grade in September, yes.
Oh, wow. Well, I remember when she was born. I was showing my age. Next, we have Julie Orchid, who is the mom of 2 daughters. Hi. Hey, Julie.
Hi.
And Madison Carter, who's from Salt Lake City, and she has a 3-year-old and a baby. So she's one of our younger Mom Zoomers. Hey, Madison.
Hi.
Welcome to the Moms Club.
Welcome, Madison.
And thanks. Leslie Harrell, who has a son and a daughter, and she is here in Austin, Texas. So welcome, Leslie. Welcome, Mom Zoomers. Welcome into the Moms Club. So we have our guest today is Denise Davies, and Denise is an interior designer, and she's also, what we've been talking about is she's the mother of a son who was diagnosed with autism as a young baby, and he's now 19 years old and doing really, really well. So she's been really interesting to talk to her about her journey. So let's hear if any moms have any questions. Julie, do you have any questions for Denise?
Well, I was listening a little bit on driving in, and it's amazing what you've accomplished. And you lost me at Ostrich Burger and the George Foreman Grill. So I'll have to learn more about that. But I just would like to know, I think it's critical what you were able to say, like, this worked for my child. And when you were talking about diet, and I just would love for you to recap a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, so the first thing that, when Jesse was diagnosed with autism, and now if there's doctors, there's pediatricians who specialize in this, the first thing that they would have you do is take the kid off of gluten and casein immediately. And to see if they really strict, though, meaning you don't put a piece of bread in the toaster because you'll contaminate the toaster if it's a
Oh,
wheat piece of bread. It's really got to be clean and to really be dedicated for a month and write it down. See how he is. I
yeah.
had. It's funny. I was going through a divorce at the time, which just added another extra layer of
Oh, how
fun.
fun.
Right. Yeah.
My son would go to his dad's, who, of course, the men are, I don't mean to be, um, anyway, you know how men
We
are.
get what you're saying. We get what you're saying.
This
Got
kid
it.
line, and he would come back from from his dad's, and he'd be a mess, literally, because his dad was feeding him pizza all weekend, and he would have digressed. And it took me, a good 3 to 4 days to get him back on the program again and to detox him.
Wow.
But really, it's you will know a lot within a month if you really follow that diet to the letter. I believe you'll know if your child is will respond to it or not. Not all kids do. I was lucky that my child did. The other component of it is food allergies. He was allergic to 17 different foods. um and through he took allergy drops, and I mentioned the food rotation diet, and through all of that we were able to build up his gut biome and his immune system, and now he's not allergic to anything. So it
Yeah.
really is, as a mom, we know our kids. Like, we know, really, just watching them and observing them. And don't let somebody says, "Oh, I'll just give him one cookie, it'll be fine." Grandma's like, "Give him a cookie." No,
Right.
not let grandma give him a cookie.
You really
So
have to enlist
critical.
people as allies, the critical people in the
Mhm.
like teachers and grandma, and all of those people have to be with the program and have to understand what you're doing, because I mean it's so hard as it is just to be on the diet and choose restaurants that are have gluten-free kitchens. I've done it. I remember how hard it was.
I
Yeah,
brought
it's like having a support team. It's
Right.
critical. So thank you for sharing that.
A
Your
lot, a
story
lot
is
of
amazing.
times it's hard with the dads though, under any circumstances, because they want to do the easy way. Like the pizza is the easiest thing for them. So sometimes that's harder to get them, on the program. But yeah, you do need allies. That absolutely. Helen, do you have any questions for Denise?
Well, it's great to hear how you've been able to help your son overcome this. And what's been interesting with COVID is, um, so Monica said I live in Arlington, Virginia. We had to pull our daughter out of public school because it was all online last fall. And so talking to other moms recently, we've had a number of parents have found out because of COVID that they pulled their kids out of school. The schools were, "Oh, your child doesn't have a learning disability. Oh, your child's not dyslexic. Oh, they don't need to be tested." And come to find out, after the parents pay, as opposed to the public school system, which is supposed to take care of the testing and was not doing it, that, "Oh, this child is dyslexic, and this child is having a learning disability or has sensory issues," or all these different things that never came out except because of COVID, when their kids were pulled out of public school. And even though 50% of the kids have, these, what is it? Independent
IEPs.
IEP, yes. They're not, they, were very, very resistant to doing it. And I mean, kudos to you for sticking with it, because so many parents were just like, "Okay, well, we'll keep our kids in public school." But then you realize, because of COVID, we've been able to, you know, find a solution by having to spend the money to put our kids in private school. So did you have any issues with school? What kind of schools or educational options did you have for your son?
Well, I was fortunate enough to be living in New York City. So from age 2 to 3, he received services about 60 hours a week, paid for by the state of New York. It was incredible. It was like $150,000 of services for free, it was amazing. And then when he was 3.5. He went to an autistic preschool right in Manhattan, and he got, it was 12 kids in a class, 4 teachers,
Wow.
and he would get services afterwards. I just, the more the better.
Yeah.
Especially when they're that young, they can't. I believe they can't have enough services. It can't hurt them.
That's fantastic. You're so lucky. I mean, you would think, you know, we've got supposedly some of the best school systems here in Virginia in the country, but they're not doing what clearly our kids need. And yeah, I could go on my tirade about all of that, but I will spare you the spare you
Well,
the
you know,
detail.
I really think it depends on which school system you're in, because we know someone in Austin whose son is, you know, very dyslexic. Well, he has lots of learning disabilities as well as being autistic. And she has found that the very best system is the public school system, because that has the very best therapists in it. And they really, she's gotten amazing support. So it really is a case by case basis.
So that's really I think the problem is that it's so uneven across the
Yes, it
country. So it depends where, I mean, that's just where the
And it
parents can
actually could
work,
even be
you know.
school to school, from what I've heard of other cases, even here in Arlington. So
Yeah.
it's been very frustrating.
Well, because Fairfax County's, but yeah, you're right, it's supposed to be some of the best schools in the country. But I
Mhm.
suppose if that's for mainstream kids.
Yeah.
Madison, do you have any questions for Denise?
Yeah, so my daughter, that's 3, we had found out she had a stroke when she was around like 4 months old. And so I would just like to know what your advice is for young moms in advocating for their kids in medical situations. I know for us, we had to like switch neurologists. Just some people didn't sit right with us. And so what would be your advice? Because I know it can be intimidating when you're speaking to someone who's a doctor to advocate for your child.
No, I would say trust your gut. Really, nobody knows. A mom is the best advocate for their child, and really trust your gut. And what I learned over, the last 20 years, doctors are always put up on a pedestal like a god, and they're just people like you and I who put their pants on one leg at a time. And there's some very good doctors and very open-minded doctors, and there's doctors that are not very good and not very open-minded. I remember when I brought my son for his 2-year checkout, his gut was literally out to here. I mean, he looked really deformed, and the doctor said, "Oh, he's fine. He's just chubby." And this was a top pediatrician in New York City. So I'm like, "You're nuts. I'm out of here." And so you just really don't be intimidated. If you don't like what the doctor is saying, thank you very much, and trust your gut, because you'll know your child better than anyone.
Leslie, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I think it's really, I mean, you're talking about your situation in New York and how great it was and all that, and then you made this decision to move. And then in the mix somewhere in there is also you're pursuing this career. Like that seems like a whole lot, like balancing at one time. I'm just like, how did you kind of navigate? I mean, these were some major things. And then here you had all this great experience in New York City taking care of your autistic kid, which had to feel very comfortable. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, I'm going to do all this and I'm going to move away from all this. It had to be super heavy. So like, how did you know it was time, and how did you navigate, like, okay, I'm going to go pursue this career, and then also as a divorced mom navigate taking this as a single mom and doing this great career, and then also then plunging your child into a different environment? Like how did all that those pieces kind of come together and you felt good and comfortable with it?
It's funny because what the ladies were saying earlier is it is segments, and I look at my life and my career in segments. The first life was the fashion industry. The second career was Jesse and his health and getting him on the right path. And my third career, when I felt like he was on the right path and he was in public school, he was in first grade, he went to public school. That's when I actually started. I had nothing to do because he was doing so well. I had fought for so many years. I was so busy. I remember sitting at the end of my driveway and he got on the school bus and I just sat there and sobbed, because I'm like, well, is this it? Now I'm stuck in the country and there's nothing. What am I going to do with my life? And so it was kind of in segments, and that's when I decided to pursue another passion of mine, which was interior design. And my mother said, just take a class, get out of the house, go do something. And I first took a class in welding. I thought I was going to be the girl in Flashdance, and that didn't really work out too well. I almost burned my arm off. That was not welding was not for me. And then I took a couple of classes in fashion, and I had not fashion, in interior design, and I had bought and flipped a couple of homes when I was in my first career. So I always had, my father was in real estate. I kind of had it in my blood, and I received some formal training, and that's how I started. And just one day at a time, though. Really, my first job was a mudroom. Literally, anybody would hire me to do anything. I did it, and I did it to the best of my ability, and I learned, and I grew my business from there. It was 10, 11 years ago now.
So your business now is you shared with us that you work with a lot of young families who maybe have moved from New York to Connecticut, but you're also doing playrooms and educational playrooms. What led you in that direction as far as your interior design goes? What made you focus on that?
First of all, as an interior designer, who wouldn't want to design a playroom? It's the most fun thing you could possibly do. And I was fortunate enough where I had met a teacher who has a business as well, Smart Playrooms. And we met about 2.5 years ago, and she approached me to do a very big project for her. It was a communal commercial play space in New York City. So I had brought my whole team in, and we had designed it, and it was it came out incredibly well. And we've been working together ever since. And then when COVID hit, I come from a product background. I was a clothing manufacturer. My partner, Carrie, knew all the great products to use for the playrooms, rock climbing walls, monkey bars. It was all based on education, though. And COVID hit. It was kind of scary at the beginning. I have a staff of people, and you couldn't even go into anybody's house to design their home. So I really dedicated 8 hours a day to working with a company, and we had team meetings every day, and in 3 months we put together this incredible website selling product. And smartd2playrooms.com. I'm not pitching it, I'm just saying it's that's our website.
No, that's great.
And we sell all of these educational playroom products, and we found a niche in the market. There wasn't anything really out there, and nobody was doing it.
And everyone needed a playroom during COVID or two.
Well, and
believe me,
these moms all know how I shop. So if it had been around when my kids were that age, I would have had the whole collection. Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Zubra moms, for joining us. And thank you, Denise. I feel like this time has just flown by because it's been so interesting. Thanks, Denise. And as she mentioned, you can find her design work at D2 Interiors, or also at Smart D2 Playrooms and at Smart Playrooms. And you can also check out the Moms Club at InsideTheMomsClub.com. Also, we're on Instagram at Inside the Moms Club. We're on the UBN Go network, and we're everywhere you can find a podcast. You can listen to us online. We're also on Clubhouse. So please check us out if you're a member. That's our latest endeavor, and we look forward to having longer conversations and fun conversations on Clubhouse.